A huge old elephant was running on his last strength. His heavy steps echoed across the cracked ground of the savanna, and every breath came with a harsh, painful effort. Behind him followed a pack of hyenas, 7 hungry predators with glowing yellow eyes. They did not rush and did not hurry, because they knew perfectly well the prey was not going anywhere now. The pack was led by a large alpha female with a torn left ear, experienced, patient, and able to feel the exact moment when it was time to switch from chasing to attacking. The hyenas worked together in a calm and methodical way, shifting to the right and to the left, blocking any chance to escape, and step by step closing the space around their prey. The elephant tried to go north. 2 hyenas were already there, not attacking, just blocking the way with their bodies. He turned west. The pack shifted and cut off the path again. The river with its steep bank was getting closer every minute. That was exactly where the hyenas were driving him, to a place where there would be no way back. When the elephant's back legs touched the water, he stopped. 7 silhouettes stood ahead in a half circle. 2 hyenas moved behind him, 2 more on the sides. The pack began to tighten the ring, working the way they had done hundreds of times before. The first bites were short and precise, on the back legs, on the sides where the skin is thinner. The elephant turned, trying to push them away with his trunk, but every time he turned toward one hyena, 2 others came from behind. Then one of them struck right under the knee of his front leg. The elephant stumbled, tried to keep his balance, but his legs slipped on the wet stones, and he fell heavily into the water, sending up a huge splash. The alpha female with the torn ear rushed forward immediately, in a leap, without hesitation. Her jaws closed on the elephant's throat. She bit in and began to pull. Another moment, and the main vessels in his neck would be torn apart. The other hyenas were already rushing in. It was the end. A blow from a massive horn hit her from the side, so powerful and sudden that the alpha female was thrown away and rolled several times along the bank before stopping. It was a rhinoceros, a massive male with his horn lowered, moving straight and without stopping, the way only someone moves who is not used to giving way. Behind him, 3 more came out of the bushes, a small group that had been walking to the water along their usual path and found that the way was blocked. Most likely they were simply going to drink, and the hyenas happened to be in their way. In any case, the rhinos did not try to understand. They decided to remove the threat. The hyenas scattered in all directions. The alpha female tried to hold her position, but a second rhino quickly came close, forcing her to jump back. Within a few seconds, not a single hyena remained on the bank. The rhinos reached the water and began to drink, calmly and steadily, as if nothing unusual had just happened. They drank, stood for a while, and then went back into the bushes, not paying any attention to the elephant lying in the water. Silence returned to the shore. The huge body lay where it had fallen, partly in the water, partly on the stones by the bank, motionless and dark against the light river. The head was thrown to the side, the tusks went into the water, the trunk lay on the surface like a torn root. The river flowed around him without stopping. The sun was going down, and that special kind of silence stood over the shore, the kind that comes only when everything is already over. At that moment, nature itself seemed to freeze, as if saying a final goodbye to the giant of the land. I was patrolling the eastern sector of the reserve when I noticed him from a distance, a dark mass right by the water, motionless, partly hidden by the river. I drove closer, got out of the jeep, and walked to the shore. A dead elephant in the river is always urgent work. The body cannot be left like that. It will quickly begin to rot and poison the water downstream. So it had to be checked, and a team with equipment had to be called for removal. I started going down to the shore, already thinking about what kind of machinery would be needed to lift such a massive body. I came almost right up to him when the elephant's trunk moved slightly. I jumped back, then froze and stared at that spot. Again, just a little, barely noticeable movement. But it was there. Then I saw the elephant's side slowly rise and fall. Just a little, but it was breathing. He was alive. I took out my radio and called Kwesi. our senior veterinarian, who had seen everything in 20 years of work in the reserve, and asked him to come with a bina and a full set of equipment, and also to bring a cargo trailer with a winch, because it was completely clear that this elephant would not be able to get out of the water on his own. While I was waiting for the team, I carefully walked around the elephant along the shore, trying not to disturb him too much. Fresh bite marks on his sides and back legs showed that there had been a recent fight with predators, the kind of torn wounds that only hyenas leave. I moved around to his front legs and stopped. On his right front leg, almost at the knee, a dark metal outline showed under the skin, a wire snare, old and deeply embedded in the flesh, with a long hardened swelling around it. The skin around the loop had become rough and deformed, and the leg was so swollen that the shape of the wire could barely be seen under the inflamed tissue. The snare had clearly been there for a long time, and it was exactly what had turned a strong animal into easy prey for the hyenas. With a leg like that, he could not walk fast enough to stay with the herd, could not escape from predators, and could not defend himself. I took a photo of the snare and sent it to Kwesi with a note that we would not manage without surgery. At that moment, I heard a familiar sound behind me, the quiet crack of dry grass, something an experienced ranger never confuses with anything else. I turned around sharply. On the ridge of the bank, about 20 meters away, stood four hyenas. The large alpha female with the torn ear was looking straight at me, calm and unhurried, the way only those look who are completely sure of their superiority. I instinctively reached for my shoulder and only then realized my fatal mistake, one that could have cost me my life. The rifle was still in the jeep. The hyenas took a step forward, all four at once, slowly but confidently. I turned and ran to the vehicle as fast as I could, hearing behind me how the pack was almost breathing down my neck. The jeep was close, but those few seconds felt like an eternity. I pulled the door open, grabbed the rifle, turned, and fired toward the hyenas, barely aiming. The bullet hit the ground near their paws, a burst of dust, and the loud shot made the pack jump back. They ran about 30 meters away and stopped again, making howling sounds to each other. They clearly were not planning to leave. For the next 20 minutes, I held the perimeter alone, not letting the hyenas get close to the barely alive elephant. I fired into the air every time they came closer, pushed them back to a safe distance, and reloaded the rifle again and again. The elephant lay in the water behind me, and I could hear his breathing. With every minute, he had less and less strength, and the hyenas could feel it too, so they stayed stubbornly nearby, refusing to give up what they saw as their rightful prey. When at last a cloud of red dust appeared from around the bend in the road, and I heard the sound of engines, I let out a breath of relief. Kwesi and Abina arrived in a veterinary pickup, and behind them came a heavy cargo trailer with a boom crane. At the sight of the vehicles and several people, the hyenas moved back into the tall grass, and this time disappeared for good. Kwesi went down to the shore, quickly examined the elephant, and immediately understood how serious the situation was. Abina prepared a sedative, not full anesthesia, but a light calming dose so the elephant would not panic during the lifting. Then she gave an injection at the base of the ear, where the skin is thinnest. The trailer driver set up the crane over the bank and lowered wide canvas straps down, the kind used for lifting large animals, spreading the weight evenly across the body. Getting the straps under the elephant lying in the water turned out to be a difficult task. Kwesi and I stepped into the river up to our waists, pushing the canvas under the animal's belly. The current made it hard, the straps caught on stones at the bottom, and the elephant moved weakly several times, so we had to stop and calm him with our voices. Abina stood on the shore, watching the giant closely, his pulse, his breathing, his reaction to every movement. We worked for almost half an hour, but finally all four straps were in place and secured to the crane hook. The driver started the winch. The cable tightened, the straps wrapped firmly around the body, and the massive weight slowly, centimeter by centimeter, began to rise out of the water. The elephant hung in the straps above the river for a few seconds that felt very long, None of us said a word. Then the trailer carefully moved back and lowered him onto the platform. When the elephant finally lay on a solid surface and the crane stopped, Abina checked his pulse and lifted her head. "We're taking him." At the rehabilitation center, they began working on the elephant immediately. Kwesi removed the snare surgically. The procedure took more than 2 hours, and the wire had grown deeper into the tissue than it seemed from the outside. Abina set up an 4 with antibiotics and anti-inflammatory medicine and treated all the wounds from the hyenas. On the 3rd day, the elephant began to eat for the first time. Only a little, but on his own, and this was the first real sign that he wanted to live. While the veterinarians were caring for the old elephant, the team and I finally closed a case that had been going on for several months. The snare on his leg turned out to be far from the only one. We found 8 more like it in the eastern sector and tracked down a group of poachers, who were arrested 2 weeks later. Before taking the elephant back to the savannah, we went through the entire sector and removed every single dangerous snare, by markings and the shape of his tusks. The veterinarians determined which herd the elephant belonged to, a small group of 9 individuals that stayed in the central part of the reserve. Kwesi told me directly. Physically, the elephant would recover, the wound was healing well, and his strength was coming back. But he was old and had spent enough time alone for his scent to change. If the herd did not accept him back, he would be alone in the savannah, and that would be a death sentence. Old, limping, without a herd, lions or the same hyenas would track him down within a few days. Alone, he would not survive even a month in the wild. We took him back 3 weeks later. Kwesi did not allow it earlier, saying the elephant needed to recover enough strength to handle the stress of meeting the herd. The cargo trailer moved slowly along a dirt road through the savannah, and I sat in the cab thinking about what would happen when we arrived. We found the herd near a group of baobab trees in the central part of the reserve. 9 elephants were grazing in the shade, with a few calves playing nearby. We stopped the trailer about 50 meters away and lowered a wide ramp. The old elephant stood in the back for a few seconds, then slowly, carefully stepped onto the ramp and came down to the ground, swaying slightly on his injured leg. He stopped, raised his trunk, and drew in the air. The herd noticed him almost immediately. A large male with huge tusks turned and spread his ears, letting out a loud warning trumpet, deep and rolling, strong enough that the ground seemed to tremble. 2 more adults did the same, and a 3rd stamped his foot and moved forward a few steps with his head lowered. The old elephant stood still and did not step back. He simply stood and looked at the herd, holding his trunk up. Kwesi, Abina, and I froze by the trailer and did not move. A minute passed, then another. The male with the tusks did not leave and did not come closer. He just stood there and trumpeted, and in that sound was everything you needed to understand about how ready he was to defend his herd from a stranger. Then from behind him, a female elephant came forward with a very small calf beside her, clumsy, still not used to its own legs. She walked slowly and straight, without stopping, until she came right up to the old elephant. She stopped. She reached out with her trunk and touched his face, a long, careful touch. The old elephant did not move. The female stood beside him, and her calf slowly stretched out its small trunk and touched him too. Carefully, the way you touch something unfamiliar but not frightening. No one moved. Even the male with the large tusks fell silent. Then he slowly lowered his ears and turned away, not a threatening gesture, just the end of the tension. And the whole group began to move slowly toward the old elephant, touching him with their trunks, smelling him, surrounding him from all sides, not aggressively, but the way elephants greet their own after a long separation. Kwesi, Abina, and I let out a breath of relief. The herd had accepted him, and that meant it had all not been in vain. The old elephant stood in the center of this circle, clearly enjoying being touched, and for the first time since I had seen him, his breathing finally became calm and steady. He was home. The herd began to move on, toward the watering place. The old elephant walked with them, slowly, limping slightly on his right leg, but he walked. The female with the calf stayed close to him, and the calf moved right next to his side, sometimes touching him with its trunk, as if it had already decided that this old elephant would now always be near. I watched them as they moved toward the baobab trees, until their shapes disappeared in the haze of the savanna. Kwesi came and stood beside me. We stood in silence for a moment. Then he said it was time to go back. I looked one last time. The grass, the baobabs, the shimmering horizon, and somewhere there among the trees, the old elephant was walking with his herd. Alive, finally home.